A bitter winter wind rattled the windows of a small-town diner that night. The dinner crowd was loud and warm inside, but near the door sat a young black boy, 16 years old, clutching the only hot meal he could afford all week. Across the room, an elderly white couple entered slowly, almost timidly, as if they weren't sure they belonged. Their clothes were thin for the weather, their eyes fixed on the floor as they took an empty booth. The waitress walked past them twice without stopping. They didn't even open a menu. The boy's stomach cramped from hunger. He could already taste the sandwich he had saved up for. Yet something about the couple's quiet, frail presence gnawed at him. He picked up his plate, hesitated, then slowly walked toward them. What Marcus didn't know was that this small act, this quiet decision in a corner booth, would ripple across lives and bring an unexpected knock at his door the next day. Marcus lived with his mother and 9-year-old sister Tiana in a cramped third-floor apartment that smelled of damp plaster in winter. His father had left years ago. No one in the family mentioned his name anymore. His mother cleaned offices at night and came home so tired her hands shook while folding Tiana's school clothes. For Marcus, hunger was not a stranger. Some nights there was nothing but dry cereal, yet he kept his grades up, mostly to honor the quiet sacrifices his mother made. His classmates didn't know, and Marcus worked hard to keep it that way. The day of the diner incident began like any other. Marcus sat in the back of a crowded classroom, enduring the whispers about his second-hand shoes. That afternoon, while walking home through the biting cold, he counted the coins in his pocket, just enough for a modest meal. It felt like a reward after a long week of skipped lunches. By dusk, the main street glowed with neon diner signs. Marcus pushed through the door of the old diner, greeted by the warmth of fried food and coffee. He slid onto a stool, ordered a simple sandwich and fries, and waited. Around him, the place buzzed. A group of truck drivers laughed over stories from the road. Two men in suits argued over a deal. Teenagers filled a corner booth, scrolling on their phones. He barely noticed them. His focus was on the plate set down in front of him, the smell rising like a promise. Then the bell over the door jingled again. The elderly couple stepped in. The man stooped and thin, his wife clutching his sleeve for balance. They moved as if the diner might reject them. The man politely asked the waitress for a cup of water. She nodded but did not stop to take an order. Marcus glanced at the couple again and again. The old man tried to smile at his wife, as if to hide his worry, but his fingers trembled as he wrapped them around the water glass. They whispered quietly, almost as if embarrassed to be there. In that moment, Marcus felt the kind of empathy that comes from living close to hardship. He remembered nights when his mother would push her own plate toward him, saying she wasn't hungry. He stared at his sandwich, then at them. Something inside him shifted. Marcus pushed back his stool. The legs scraped the floor, drawing a brief glance from the waitress. He picked up his plate and fries, walked over to the booth where the couple sat, and placed the meal in front of them. The old woman blinked up at him. "Oh, young man, we can't—" But Marcus only smiled faintly, shook his head, and said quietly, "Please, enjoy." He turned and walked back to his stool before they could protest further. His stomach growled, but there was a strange lightness in his chest. The couple hesitated, then slowly began to eat, sharing each bite as if it were a feast. The man lifted his eyes briefly toward Marcus's back, gratitude softening his weather-worn features. Not everyone in the diner was moved. A man at the counter muttered that kids these days shouldn't try to show off. A teenage boy in the corner snickered and took a photo on his phone. The waitress shrugged and kept working. She'd seen too much to be impressed. Marcus kept his head down, waiting out the evening rush with an empty stomach, until finally he left. The winter air cut like a blade, but he pulled his thin jacket tight and walked the long route home. At home, he didn't mention what he had done. His mother was counting bills for rent, brow furrowed with worry, and he didn't want to add another burden. That night, Marcus lay awake, hungry but strangely content, picturing the look on the old woman's face. Somewhere across town, another man had noticed too, Mr. David Reynolds. A quiet philanthropist and self-made millionaire had been at the diner that night, sitting near the back with a newspaper, He had watched the small, wordless exchange that everyone else overlooked. Reynolds had once been a boy like Marcus, poor, overlooked, sometimes judged by his appearance. For years he had sought genuine examples of selflessness to support. He often said that true character showed in what a person did when no one was watching. He followed the couple after they left the diner, offered them a warm ride to their modest home, and arranged for his foundation to deliver groceries the next morning. Yet the boy who had given away his meal stayed on his mind all night. The next day, Marcus's routine carried on. At school, he sat through math lessons, ignored a few teasing remarks about his old backpack, and walked home through the slush of melting snow. When he turned the corner onto his street, he saw a sleek black sedan parked by his building. Marcus slowed his steps. The car looked out of place among the rusted bicycles and cracked pavement. On the front steps of his building stood his mother, speaking nervously with a tall man in a dark overcoat, the same man Marcus had seen reading a newspaper in the diner. "Marcus," his mother called, her voice a mix of surprise and curiosity. "This gentleman wants to talk to you." Reynolds stepped forward with a warm smile. "I believe we crossed paths last night," he said. "You might not have noticed me." "But I noticed you," Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't do anything special, sir." "That's exactly why it mattered," Reynolds replied. "You gave away what you needed most. Not for attention, just because it was right." He gestured toward the car. "I'd like you and your mother to come with me. I want to show you something." Hesitant but trusting, they rode with Reynolds across town to a modern community center, one of several funded by his foundation. Inside were classrooms, a library, computer labs, and a notice board lined with photos of students who had received scholarships. Reynolds led them to a small office and handed Marcus's mother an envelope. Her eyes widened as she read, "A full scholarship for Marcus through college, plus a stipend to support his family's needs while he studied." Marcus was speechless. Reynolds said softly, "I grew up hungry too. I know how hard it is to keep going. But what you did in that diner told me more about your character than any grade or resume ever could. You cared enough to give away your own meal. That's the kind of heart our future leaders need." Tears welled in Marcus's mother's eyes as she squeezed her son's hand. Reynolds added, "There will be challenges, but if you stay true to that same kindness, I have no doubt you'll go far." For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt something bigger than hope. He felt seen. The weeks that followed brought quiet but meaningful change. The scholarship letter opened doors Marcus had never imagined. His teachers began to encourage him in ways they hadn't before. His classmates, once dismissive, grew curious, some even respectful. But Marcus didn't let the attention change who he was. He still helped his mother with chores, still gave time to his sister's homework, still greeted neighbors with the same gentle smile. He often visited the elderly couple he had helped that night. They had become like grandparents to him. The old woman would clasp his hands and say, "That evening you gave us more than food. You reminded us we weren't invisible." The story spread slowly across the neighborhood, not as gossip, but as inspiration. The diner's waitress began paying more attention to customers who looked down on their luck. The man who had scoffed at Marcus that night later admitted to a friend that he'd been wrong. At the community center, Marcus started volunteering, tutoring younger kids. He told them, "Kindness isn't weakness. It's strength that doesn't need to shout." The change reached deeper than scholarships or headlines. It touched hearts. Racism and poverty still existed in the town. Not every wall was torn down overnight, but Marcus's story became a quiet reminder that compassion could bridge divides more powerfully than anger alone. One evening, standing by the window of their apartment, Marcus reflected on how a single moment of sacrifice had opened an entirely new path. He realized that while the world often tries to define people by their circumstances, their color, their poverty, their struggles, every choice to lift another person pushes back against those definitions. As he prepared for college, he carried that lesson with him. Kindness can disarm prejudice. Empathy can rewrite a future. And sometimes the smallest act, like giving away a meal, can reach further than we ever imagine. He wondered, how many other lives might change if more people acted before judging, gave before receiving, believed before doubting? That thought stayed with him as the lights of the city glimmered in the distance. A quiet promise to keep choosing compassion.